"Save the baby if you can," her husband said. At 3:04, the ICU was a glass house of machines and breath. The ventilator whispered. The bed's warmer exhaled a steady hush across the blanket. I pressed gel on the probe and set it on the curve of her belly. The room was all plastic and light until the sound came through. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. A fetal heartbeat turns any room into a chapel if you let it. We did. For a moment. The rest of her was held together by electricity and our will mostly. Clear lines ran from pumps to veins, numbers stepped across a monitor like careful footprints. Her hands were warm under the forced air blanket. Her husband stood where the glass met the door frame and tried to learn a new way to breathe. "We'll talk about milestones," I said. "About days and weights and lungs. About steroids and what the numbers mean." He nodded without looking away from the rise and fall the machine made for her. "We called ethics because that's what we do when the world is bigger than one team. We wrote the plan in ink thick enough to feel with a finger. Keep her warm, keep her blood pressure up, keep the placenta fed. Reach a week we can live with. Name what we can't." The Doppler wobbled. I steadied my hand. The sound held. Outside the window, the night pressed its forehead to the glass and waited to see if we could make morning. Before the call, the night had been ordinary in the ICU way. Coffee rings on a windowsill, fogged glass, silent TVs flickering a storm with the sound muted. I'm a maternal, fetal medicine fellow who lives in the ICU more than my mailbox, the one they page when pregnancy meets trouble and refuses to back down. On my desk, a sticky note, ethics pager blinking. Legal had already been looped about a different case. The NICU transport team had texted on call, not yet rolling. Winter pressed at the building. The vents made their dry rattle. Then the transfer arrived, wrapped in helicopter air and road salt. A pregnant woman post-crash, tubes, straps, a neck collar, numbers that whispered edge of okay. The ER note was clean and brutal, non-responsive at the scene, pupils sluggish, breathing by machine, blood pressure helped by medicines. Fetus estimated at 23 to 24 weeks by the old-fashioned way, hand on abdomen, fundal height, the kind of bedside math I trust more than spreadsheets when the building is asleep. In the retrieval bay, her husband held a paper bag with the clothes they'd cut off in the ER and the wedding ring in a clear envelope, chain threaded through it. He was the kind of man who asked where to stand and then froze there, believing that obedience is a kind of help. When I told him my name and my job, he said the line I have heard only once before and never forgot. She told me if anything happened, save the baby if you can. I heard you, I said. We'll do everything to give your baby the best chance we can. We moved. ICU bed, monitors, a warmer over the blanket, a curtain pulled just enough to make the room a world. I ordered the mess of small things that add up to a plan, more careful monitoring of the baby's heart, pressure medicines in the smallest doses that still do the job, temperature tightly kept, hormones started, vasopressin and levothyroxine, because a damaged brain can't regulate the body the way it should. We'll be the stand-in, I told the nurse, and her nod said she'd signed up for worse. We explained 2 patients to the new nurse at the door, this body and the one inside, how a mother's blood pressure feeds a placenta and the placenta feeds a baby, how lowering a fever in one calms the other. I realized halfway through that I was hiding behind the tidy words. My voice was too clinical and I hated hearing it. I stepped closer to the husband and repeated myself in the language I should have used first. We're going to keep her body doing the things it needs to do so your baby can keep growing. He swallowed. Is there a word for that? Somatic support, I said. It means we keep the body working when the brain is not. We're not there yet, but I want you to have the words before we need them. He looked at me like I had handed him a tool and he wasn't sure where to put it. The ventilator humidifier showed a lazy trickle in its chamber. Top it up, I said, and someone did, and then later someone didn't. A little oversight that would matter when the day grew teeth. The first tracing on the fetal monitor was a surprise of beauty, little hills and valleys, the kind of variability that makes an obstetrician's shoulders drop a centimeter. 150 beats per minute. A proud, stubborn rhythm. We taped the paper to the glass, and we let ourselves breathe for a minute. At 6:10 her temperature crept up half a degree. At 6:40, a shade more. Her chest sounds were wetter than the start of the shift. Cultures, I said, blood, urine, sputum, labels neat, times logged, antibiotics considered and started. The pressor pump ticked up a notch to keep her blood pressure in the lane the placenta likes. On the tracing, the baby's heart told the truth about the mother's drop, a dip that matched it, then recovery when we lifted the numbers back. She's telling us when we're slow, the bedside nurse said, meaning the fetus, and I nodded. 2 patients, 1 loop. The new ICU resident asked me whether we should deliver now to save the baby, and my answer was the one I have given too many times in too many rooms. 23 weeks is a cliff. Another day is a rope. We fight for days. I told him the window we needed to reach for steroids, 2 shots to help tiny lungs learn to open, how 24 weeks at sunrise lets us start, how 26 gives us better odds, how 28 would be a holiday. He put the dates in his phone as if the calendar would listen. At 9 o'clock, we convened at the foot of the bed, ICU attending, me, NICU fellow, ethics, charge nurse, social work, chaplain. We made a stack of what we knew and what we feared. I shared the husband's sentence about saving the baby. Ethics asked about prior wishes. The husband reached into his wallet and pulled out a creased donor card in her name. She kept it behind her license, he said, voice steady. I don't know if that matters right now. It did, and not the way he feared. It meant she had thought about what her body might do for others. It meant we had to hold 2 ideas at once, support for a pregnancy and a plan for what comes after if we can. We walked back into the room with a plan that felt like a braid. Keep her pressure up, keep her temperature normal, keep infections out, feed through a tube, watch the baby's heart like a hawk, start steroids the moment the calendar turned kind, reevaluate every morning. We wrote it on the whiteboard in the corner like a classroom lesson because families need walls to hold plans when hands can't. At noon, I went to the family room that never smells like home and gave a version of statistics to a man in shock. He listened with that breathless patience that makes you feel like you're stealing. I thought of the meeting I had ruined a year ago when I led with curves and lost the room. My mentor's rule rang in my head. Say the math. Lead with love. So I said the math only after I said the love. We will fight for time. We'll tell you what we see. We'll use every tool we have. And we will not lie to you. He closed his eyes. Thank you for not lying, he said. When he opened them, he touched the chain in the envelope. She hates needles, he said, and the room became a person again. The first dose of antibiotics ran in at twilight. I watched the ventilator humidifier bubble and thought of the plant in my office I had killed by forgetting to water it. The fetal tracing stayed beautiful. The NICU fellow taped a ruler beside it and scribbled ranges on a sticky note. 24 weeks, half and half, 26, better, 28, better still. Each number was a door we wanted to reach and open. At 21:30, the respiratory therapist lifted an eyebrow at the humidifier and wrote refill in small letters on the vent. The shift changed and the scribble got missed. By 1:15, the mucus in her breathing tube had thickened, and each suction was harder than the last. This is how night makes trouble quietly through small neglected corners. At 2 o'clock, a single fever spike made the monitor's tone take on that insistent edge. We drew more cultures. We widened antibiotics. The pressors, the blood pressure medicines, ticked up again. The fetal heart dipped with the mother's pressure drop, then climbed when we pushed it back into lane. The baby was the most honest gauge in the room. The Doppler sang its stubborn rhythm, and I loved it the way you love a stranger on a bus who hums the right tune. At 5:40, a scan from radiology arrived. Foreign words for most people. For me, a language I could read with my hands. There was swelling where you don't want swelling. There were shadows that read injury. There were no bright bleeds to drain, no fixes to fix. The ICU attending squeezed the bridge of his nose. We'll do a formal exam, he said. By the book. He meant later that morning, after warming, after rechecking labs, after making sure we had not missed anything that still had levers. Will she wake up? The husband asked me. It was daylight. I had not slept. The window had frost on the corners. The sun drew a silly triangle on the floor. I did not answer with a statistic. I told him the plan. We are going to do a series of tests to see how her brain is reacting, I said. If those tests show that her brain can no longer control the body, if they show there is no blood flow there, we will talk to you about what that means. For her. And for your baby. He nodded and then shook his head and then nodded again as if trying to loosen a word that had stuck. We did the exam in ritual order, checked reflexes that belong to the brainstem, the little stalk that keeps the body's basics going. We watched eyes for movement. There was none. We touched the cornea with a wisp. No blink. We checked for a cough when the suction passed the back of the throat. Nothing. We checked for a reaction when we turned off the ventilator and let carbon dioxide rise in the blood, a test that bodies that are still fighting will hate and correct. She did not take a breath. We repeated tests. We brought a confirmatory study that does not lie the way sometimes people do, a scan that looks for flow where flow must be. There was none. It was late morning when we closed the chart on that page. Legal uses phrases that feel like hammers. Medicine tries for gentler ones and fails. The reality was simple and colder than the window glass. Her brain had died. The law would record a death. The rhythm under my hand on her belly went on. The husband sat in a chair that wasn't kind to anyone and listened while we said the formal words and then the human ones. The chaplain sat on the window ledge and didn't pretend to be strong. She folded her hands and made a circle with them, like keeping warmth in one place. I found my mentor's rule again and held it like a rung. Say the math. Lead with love. The tests show that her brain has died, I said. I did not say she or it for a few sentences. I used her name, the one on the donor card, the one he said like a promise. That means she won't wake up. She won't feel pain. She won't come back to us. The machines and the medicines can keep her body working. We can keep doing that to give your baby more time. We call that somatic support, supporting her body for the sake of the pregnancy. It is care for your baby using the gift of her body. He put his head in his hands, and I hated every clock in the world. When he lifted his face again, it was wet and calm in the same breath. Keep going, he said. She'd want this. She told me to save the baby if we could. Tell me what to sign. I showed him the form that recorded his voice as the surrogate decision maker. Ethics sat with us and wrote the consensus. Continue support for fetal benefit, revisit daily, deliver at the first clear sign the baby needed it after steroids had been given. Think about donation after. He reached for the donor card in his wallet and slid it across the table. How, he started and then stopped, as if the word had a cliff in the middle. How does that work with the baby? We will not let anything for others take from your baby, I said. If, after delivery, there are parts of her body that can become gifts, we will ask again and go gently. But for now, our work is here. Keeping blood moving. Heat, sugar, salt. Hormones her brain would have told her body to make, we give. Watching the tracing. Waiting for the steroid window. That's our clock. In the room again, I pressed the Doppler to the same spot on her belly and listened to the bass drum of a heart too small for the sound it made. The ventilator hissed, the warmer side. The ethics pager went quiet. The NICU team texted, incubator on standby. The whiteboard in the corner had a new line, written by the night nurse in careful letters. Mama's brain has died. We are carrying her body for baby. Under it, in smaller script, a second line, we will be kind. Night moves back in. Shift 2. The humidifier on the ventilator ran to empty and began to lie to us with its half-hearted gurgle. Thick secretions collected where a small miss becomes a threat. At 2:13, the alarm bloomed, a green bar pinching into yellow, then red. Her oxygen dipped and the baby's tracing folded into late dips that don't recover by themselves. We pulled the tube, cleared the plug, the respiratory therapist moving like a pianist's left hand, quick, sure, quiet. The oxygen number rose. The tracing climbed after it, faithful slow. Payoff of a plant, the therapist said, meaning the scribbled refill note no one had read, and I didn't have the energy to explain how writing rooms make metaphors and patient rooms don't need them. I put a nail sticker on the humidifier's chamber, a ridiculous purple dot, so no one would miss it again. If anyone asked, I would call it a label. Truth, a talisman. Her blood labs flickered with the first edges of a clotting problem. We called the blood bank and labeled a cooler with her name in big letters and a heart drawn by a nurse who would deny it. The pressor pumps crept up a notch, then down, then up. The numbers liked them more than I did. We checked sugar, salt, heat, hormone. We adjusted like a sailor who believes wind his moods. At sunrise, we gave the first steroid. The NICU fellow came with a tiny syringe that looked like it belonged in a dollhouse and a seriousness that could have anchored a ship. We circled dose 2 on tomorrow's calendar square with a pen that squeaked on the board. The husband set his coffee down and touched the circle with his finger like a man learning Braille. For a few hours, things were boring in the way I crave. Steady numbers, tracing in the middle of the page, no fever. I stood by the bed and let my eyes close for 2 minutes and dreamed of the letter S, because sleep sometimes gives you only initials. After lunch, ethics returned to document what we were already living. Legally, she had died at 10:42 the day before. Medically, we were keeping her body working for the benefit of the pregnancy. It was the only way to honor all the words in the room. The chaplain wrote a small prayer on the back of a supply list and slid it into the corner by the warmer where no one would mistake it for a doctor's order. It ended with "Help us count well." The second steroid landed 24 hours after the first, on the minute, and I learned again how clocks can be holy. On the evening of day 3, the tray soured late dips, repeats, the kind of pattern that tells you the placenta is getting tired despite everything right about the mother's numbers. We increased the blood pressure medicines a hair, added more oxygen, adjusted the bed to tilt a little. The baby objected and then, for a while, accepted the compromise. Can we make it until morning? The NICU fellow asked, not because dawn meant anything to a fetus, but because the crew is thicker on the ground when the sun is up. We came for the steroids, I said. We have them. We came to a window. If the heart tells us now, we go now. We called anesthesia, OB, NICU, the scrub nurse with a face like steel and hands like silk. The husband put on the paper suit people always joke about, and no one joked. I placed a gloved hand on her belly and said the baby's nickname aloud, the one he had admitted only once, shy in the hallway. The Doppler answered with that tireless drum. We rolled toward the obstetric or in a caravan of quiet. The transport isolette glowed in front like a small sun. The chaplain walked with us, holding the door with 2 fingers, as if letting a breeze in or out might change a life. Outside the hors d'oeuvres, I checked the time for the 100th time and thought the question the night had asked me from the start, the one no math makes easy. How long can a heart beat for 2 when one mind has gone quiet? We were about to ask for the baby's answer. The corridor to the obstetric theater was bright enough to make paper look gray. We moved through it like crossing ice, quiet, deliberate. The transport isolette rolled first, glowing like a small sun. Behind it came her bed, ventilator sighing, warm air blanket humming, lines sketching a handwriting we'd learned to read. The fetal strip rode with us, a cartoon river of ink. The chaplain walked to my left and held the door with 2 fingers as we passed, catching a palmful of heat as if warmth could be saved. At the threshold, we did the uncinematic necessities, names, roles, plan, oxygen in and out, who would call the time. The anesthesiologist palmed the tiny newborn mask, set it back like a crown. The scrub nurse touched each instrument as if reminding it of its job. The NICU team checked the coil in the warmer and the coin-sized hot. Straight in, straight out, the attending said. Warm room. Lights up for us, down for the baby. At the drape, I placed my gloved hand on the curve of her belly and said the nickname he'd offered me in the hallway. The Doppler answered, da-dum, da-dum. Study. Her husband stood in paper suit and cap, a uniform that makes everyone look like they're rehearsing. He wasn't. He watched with the concentration he'd used on the catheter bag the night before, as if every clear pouch in this building contained a fate. He'd asked earlier if his wife could be there. I'd told him gently, her body, yes, her mind, no. He nodded, the practiced nod of a man who's been agreeing to things that hate being agreed to. We wheeled her in. The room was pre-warmed to the kind of heat that makes people wave a hand in front of their face. Newborns don't wave, they knead. The anesthesiologist nudged the pressure medicines to keep her numbers the baby's placenta liked. The nurse at her head, 2 fingertips steady at the temples, adjusted the corner of tape that always tries to lift. Ready for baby, the NICU lead said, voice pitched like a bedtime story's last page. Her team arranged their small tools. Apple-sized bag, shoelace-thin suction, a hat. We didn't count down. We made a border with drapes, painted her belly warm amber, and let the antiseptic sweet bitter smell fill the air. I checked the strip one last time, gentle hills, honest dips. Now, I said, before hills turn to cliffs. We don't narrate these verbs for families. We don't dress them up here. Open, move, reach, lift. Hush that made even machines mind their manners. In that hush, I remembered the first Doppler at 3:04, how it turned the ICU into a chapel. This was the nave that follows, promises spoken, hands extended. A head in 2 practiced hands. Shoulders, belly, legs, a reluctant foot. A firm snip. Not a TV cry, a determined bleed. A thread pulled through a needle and tugged with care. 2 things at once. The baby onto warm mattress under warmer light, and the mother's body free of work it had done 1 minute longer than anyone could promise. The husband froze, then I chose for him, hand between shoulder blades, a steady push. Go, I said, a release, not an order. Over the NICU team, he learned the ritual. Clear, quiet suction. Mask to face, gentle squeezes. A collar of air around a brand new nose. Hat. Hand. Counts whispered. Heart rate, color, movement. Numbers called that matter to those waiting. 1 at 1 minute, better at 5. Sex announced. A smile shook one side of his mouth like wind in grass. He whispered the name. I thought I'd prepared for it. I hadn't. The sound filled the room, helium in a syllable. The NICU lead guided his hand under hers so he could feel the weight. Less than a sack of oranges, more than a planet. He blinked too many times to be dust. When asked if he was ready to walk beside the isolette, he nodded as if signing a minor treaty. We brought the baby to the drape's edge so the path between worlds wouldn't feel like a hallway. Hi, he said, then the name again, then, Mum carried you as far as she could. Words ran out. His hand said the rest. The isolette doors closed. The little ship pushed off. No rush, rushing is panic, and panic wasn't invited. Doors opened and closed. The shape of light left us for the NICU's larger navy. The quiet that followed was chapel-sized. On our side, closure, tidy, unremarkable, private. The anesthesiologist eased medicines on a gentle slope. I stood with the husband when he returned, resting a palm against his sleeve. The baby is with the team, I said. Breathing with help. Pinking up. I used that verb on purpose. It suggests a process, not a state. He nodded as if nodding could keep the sentence true. And now, he asked. Now we keep our promises, I said. Thank her body for the time it gave. Do the rituals we planned. If you want to carry on her other wishes, we'll help you. He held the donor card the way some people hold a relic. We do, he said. The chaplain stepped in, as if she knew the cadence. She brought a bottle that smelled like church. Words, she asked. Please, he said. Not too many. She touched a circle on his wife's forehead with a thumb light enough not to wake an infant. Thank you for what your body has done, she said. We carry forward what you began. We took the care back from the or like a baton at the last leg of a relay. In her room, lights low, warmer humming from the empty space where the isolette had waited, fetal monitor quiet, its paper ribbon coiled like a job completed. We asked again, because consent is a stream you cross each time, not a rock you lift once. Are you ready? He swallowed around barbs. Yes. We turned off the medicines that had kept the placenta's lane even after the placenta was gone. Lowered oxygen. The ventilator sighed and fell quiet like a room asked to hush after a reading. Tubes out. Corners of her mouth cleaned. Hair combed. The chain with the ring returned. A chair for him. A pillow for his forehead. Bodies need plans for the next 15 minutes. We removed the breathing tube the same way we do when we expect a body to wake, gentle, steady, ready to catch a cough that never came. The monitor drew a straight line in keeping with the law's straight line from the day before. One room went still so another room, down the hall, could learn new noise. He cried only when he stood to leave. He put his hand on her ankle, the kind of touch a body remembers weight by, and kissed it because anything else felt like theft. He held the chain and said the name we had not said for 24 hours because names are anchors and anchors can be unfair. The chaplain closed her eyes. I pressed my fingertips into the counter's edge until they hurt. It kept my face ordinary. The donation team arrived with the reverent competence I've grown to trust. Quiet, tidy, better at I'm sorry than most because they've practiced inside it. Some gifts were possible. Others weren't in the wake of what we'd carried. They explained without convincing. He said yes where she would have. He said no where his keeping mattered. They returned later on a timeline shaped like a sunrise. The nurses who'd been at her side lined the hall and touched their hearts without turning the ward into theater. Reverence does not require a stage. The NICU is a different country, 5 floors up, 3 shades brighter, smelling of warmed plastic and soap. The isolette had docked between 2 others. The monitor above it ticked out a rhythm I will never get tired of. A nurse had written the baby's name on the plastic with a dry erase star. A knit octopus with soft tentacles rested by a shoulder to keep little hands from wandering to tubes, someone's clever mercy. A small mask sent easy air in gentle puffs. A hat sat like a respectful joke. Lines carried sugar, fat medicines. Breathing well with help, the nurse said. A sentence I'd wear around my neck forever. Numbers nice. Color good. Watching for the bleeds you know we watch for. Caffeine started for the pauses. We got the second steroid in time. He passed me in the doorway, a father who hadn't slept, moving with new elegance, small, confident hands, patience to wait a minute for trust. He said her name. The monitor kept its honest song. A foot twitched, maybe coincidence, maybe recognition. Skin to skin when? He asked. Soon, the nurse said. We'll tie wires in little ropes, warm me like a pie, then open the box. She would love that, he said, meaning his wife. Science breaks politely, then thoroughly. Days were built of tasks that fight becoming routine, securing lines, logging numbers, teaspoon-sized feeds, grams turning into small feasts. The baby learned to breathe without forgetfulness. Nurses taught him to tuck legs into frog, to rest a palm on a belly without pressing. He learned kangaroo, bare chest, baby against skin, wires arranged like a map you cannot get wrong. He slept once with his mouth open and the baby snoring in the same key. A volunteer took a picture no filter could improve. I visited weekly because I believe in following the thread you began. The team reported like a choir. Head scans clean, as if canceling rain on a picnic day. Lungs sticky but learning. Gaining. On a Tuesday, the nasal mask left for short spells. On a Friday, a bottle. On a Sunday, he stood by the big window with her on his shoulder, and the old world outside had the decency to look exactly the same. He stopped by the ICU in between. On our whiteboard, the one for ice machine gripes and broken scanner warnings, he wrote, "Thank you for the time you gave us." No heart. 2 little beat marks between words. Everyone washing hands there pretended not to see. A month later, a small ritual in the NICU, 6 chairs arranged for a graduation no one would dare plan. The chaplain read names, babies, mothers, and the word daughter twice, new each time. The ICU nurse who'd kept 2 fingertips at a temple touched a sock and blinked. The NICU nurse who'd written the name on the isolette bought a better marker. I stood a corner back, the place my role belongs, and remembered the first night's Doppler turning us into a chapel. We don't say miracle. We say good luck, Good care, good timing, and often we say nothing. This wasn't a ribbon moment. It was a room of people who had carried a door together and then set it down, watching a small person walk through on feet she didn't have when we started. Clinic came sooner than I believed. He pushed a pram, produced a list in Joy's handwriting. She wore a hat with ears and a scowl that will serve her. She assessed fluorescent lights like a cross-exam and then decided we were amusing. He told me she slept like a gremlin from midnight to 4 and a saint from 4 to 8. He now makes coffee. He once mocked and polices hand-washing like a sergeant. He told me the donation team called. Some people live easier because she carried a card. She did both, he said. She gave time, then parts. Sounds cold. It wasn't. He slid over a photo, her on a beach, laughing, hair in her mouth, ring at her throat. I pressed my palm flat on the table so it wouldn't do anything it would regret. She asked me to save the baby if we could, he said. You did. We carried the window, I said. You walked through it. He shook his head but let it stand. I took the long way back, past the ICU glass that remembers a warm blanket and a ribbon of paper, past the ethics office where the pager sits face up for odd hours, past the generator room where a man who loves electricity more than fame drinks unreasonable tea, past the NICU where the octopus maker leaves bags of arms that look like hope. A cleaning cart's clear bag caught the light like water. For a blink I saw the ICU again, the Doppler and the hiss, the warmer's hum, a husband's hand on a curve where a drum beat. I saw the ORs lift into light. I saw the NICU star beside a name. I heard a whisper that filled a room. We make meaning where medicine finds a margin. Not victory declarations, counted seconds handed over warm. One line went flat so another could rise. Doppler became monitor. Monitor became noise that means life. That night, another family room that didn't smell like home. I said the math. I led with love. I kept my voice from hiding. When I picked up a probe and the room turned into a chapel again, I wasn't surprised. Some sounds are ancient. She comes to clinic monthly now. Her chart sits beneath a sheet labeled practice guidelines because rails matter even when trains pick strange tracks. Last week her father messaged. She smiled at the dog today. It was both of them first. I wrote back, count it. He sent a photo, terrified, delighted dog, baby taking credit well. When the ethics pager blinks at 3:04, I picture a hat with ears under fluorescent light, a green strip of paper taped to glass, a whiteboard where a nurse wrote, "Mama's brain has died. We are carrying her body for baby. Under it, we will be kind." I trust that sentence more than any drug. I've seen what it can do. Some winter night, a Doppler will sing again. A transport isolate will warm like sunrise. The question will arrive, how long can a heart beat for two when one mind has gone quiet? We'll answer the only way we can, together, with time, with hands, with patience, with a door carried as far as we can, and a small person walking through while the new noise starts.